In the wake of the controversial new book of the former military president of Nigeria, General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, a lot of conversations have been had about some of the revelations that he made in the book. One of the key revelations revolve around the much controversial January 1966 military coup, which incidentally was the first military coup in Nigeria, tagged a revolution by the officers that partook in it. But there's a question that no one has asked thus far. Yes, IBB revealed in his book that Major John Obienu, an Igbo, crushed the 66 coup. But people have not bothered to ask, who was this Major John Obienu and how did he crush the January 1966 coup? Let us find out. We shall be getting our answers to these questions from reliable sources, namely the memoirs published by some of the principal participants of the revolution, the declassified British secret reports on the 66 coup, the official military police report on the 66 coup, and other plausible literatures written on the subjects. We shall be examining the book Why We Struck, written by Adewale Ademoyega, one of the principal officers that plotted that revolution, who survived the civil war. We shall also be reviewing the book The Nigerian Revolution and the Biafran War by Alexander Madiebo. That is the first literature that was ever written about the coups of 66 and the Nigerian Civil War. Firstly, Major John Obienu at the time, 1965, was a Sandhurst-trained soldier who was the commander of the 2nd Reconnaissance Squadron based at Abeokuta. Smartly dressed with a good poise and a good command of the English language, he was the role model of a lot of his peers and junior officers too. This much was reviewed by Ibrahim Badamasi in his memoir. What many people do not know is that in fact, Major John Obienu was, or at least appeared to be, one of the revolutionary officers that plotted the January 15, 1966 coup. That should surprise and in fact shock you. Given his background and disposition during the recruitment of officers for the 66 coup, Major Obienu was sounded out by the young revolutionary officers, namely Majors Emmanuel Ifajuna and Wale Ademoyega. He was sounded out as one that was going to be very instrumental to their cause, majorly because of the position he held at that time. When he was approached in the late 1965 by his fellow majors, Obienu assured them that he was with them and that he was prepared and willing to bring out his troops for the purpose. This much was made known in the book Why We Struck by Adewale Ademoyega, page 80, and we quote him thus. The Reconnaissance Squadron was commanded by Major Obienu. He was also Sandhurst trained, but was less inclined to take seriously to the details of his duties. His attention was drawn more to the glamour than to the responsibility of his appointments. But he assured us that he was with us and that he was prepared and willing to bring out his troops for the purpose. With this consent, it seemed as if we had the nucleus of 3 small units for our use in the Lagos-Ibadan axis. The Enugu axis was settled and the preparation continued. This was our first introduction to Major John Obienu by one of the principal officers of the revolution. The recruitment of the officers that were going to take part in the revolution of Nigeria was carried on earnestly but secretly. Major Obienu, having been identified by Major Sifajuna and Ademoyega, was ticked for his role. Now the coup was divided into 2 parts, the north and the south. Major Patrick Kaduna Chukwuma Nzobo was to command the coup operations in the northern part of the country, assisted by another Major Timothy Onwatwegu, who worked with Major Kaduna Nzobo at the Nigerian Military Training College in Kaduna. In the south, Majors Ifajuna and Adewale Ademoyega were to command the operations. But the south was always going to pose a huge problem because of the other regions that have been created therein, which includes the eastern region, the western region, and the midwestern region, including the capital, Lagos. Major Chude Soki, an astute, brilliant officer, was marked as the commander of the operations in the east and in the midwest, Enugu and Benin, respectively. Captain Emmanuel Mobosi, a 27-year-old Sandhurst-trained officer as well, was marked as the commander of the operations in Ibadan. But sadly and unfortunately for the revolution, Major Chude Soki was posted to India for studies in late December 1965, and a dire-minute recruitment of a capable and trustworthy officer as his replacement had to be done. In his stead, Lieutenant Oguchi was sounded out and briefed about his task in the East and Midwest regions. Captain Udaja, on the other hand, a young Air Force soldier, was to fly to Calabar on the morning of the coup and effect the release of Chief Obafemi Awolowo, who was serving jail terms for treasonable felony. The planning of the coup went on secretly in earnest. Now that we've known who Major John Obienu was, the next pertinent question is then, how was this major able to crush the same revolution that he seemed to be a part of at the conception stage? We shall begin to answer this question by unraveling the events that happened on the night of the coup. Now, on the eve of their revolution, the night of January 14, 1966, in the southern part of the country, in fact the country's capital, Lagos, like the gathering of the apostles at the Last Supper, many young officers gathered at Major Ifajuna's military quarters at Apapa for final briefing before the HR. Now, Major Wale Ademoyega, in his book Why We Struck, gives us an insight as to what happened that night. Page 100. 2 officers were conspicuously absent from the gathering. One was Major Obienu, commander of the 2nd Reconnaissance Squadron based at Abeokuta. He had been briefed well in advance and was supposed to attend this gathering so that after the address, he would proceed to Abeokuta to bring his armored vehicles to back up our Lagos operation. It was thought that he might yet turn up, and we kept our expectation of him alive. The other was a young captain who, at the first light of day, was to fly in a special plane to Calabar to effect the release of Chief Awolowo. He too had not turned up, and we expected that he would do so later. We begin to see that Major Obienu did not in fact turn up at the final briefing leading to the H hour of their operations, but they felt and really expected that he was still going to make it, one way or the other. Where laid Obienu's loyalty? Wale Ademoyiga writes thus when their coup began to fall apart. The news of Ironsi's escape came as a shock to all of us. If the federal guards were already made hostile, then the officers' mess was no longer tenable to us. It could no longer be used as our tactical headquarters. What was our answer to this new development? There were only two possible safety valves. One, we had many roadblocks inside the city. If Ironsi had got into the hands of our own troops, they would have arrested him. Two, if Major Obienu had reported at the outskirts of the town as he was previously ordered, he would be available to us for a fight against Ironsi. Since Obienu did not turn up at all on January 14 to confirm his preparedness for action, we were not sure whether or not he had turned up with his squadron. It would be a good thing if he had come. We needed to link up with him. The rendezvous had been previously fixed at Airport Junction on Abeokuta Road. Soon I was at the rendezvous on Agege Motor Road at the Airport Road Junction, and the Forest group were there. No ferrets, armored vehicles from Abeokuta. No trace of Ifajuna's group. Chukwuka's group had not come. Why? Ifajuna was driving ahead of Anoforo and did not seem to have stopped at all at the rendezvous. Anoforo had sent an officer to the gate of the Ikeja cantonment. There were no signs of the ferrets or Ifajuna's group. But the 2nd Battalion had been roused by Ironsi and they were already holding the gate in full strength. It became obvious that Major Obienu had defaulted altogether. Now we ask the question, what could be the possible reasons why Major Obienu had a last-minute change of mind towards the revolution? Why did he default altogether? We get our answers from the British secret files on Nigeria's first coup and the Civil War. And we read thus. Unfortunately for their revolution, Obienu overdrank at Maimilari's cocktail party. Instead of attending the briefing at Ifajuna's house or proceeding straight to Abeokuta as expected, Major John Obienu branched at Shomolu to taste his mistress and became glued to a cleavage of extraordinary amplitude. He lacked the strength to get up, as his name was melodiously chanted with Gregorian devotion. The revolution to save Nigeria and do better than the politicians began to fall apart piece by piece. When Obienu woke up in the morning, he tried to find out if the revolution proceeded without him and if he might still fit in the scheme of things. So he went to the airport junction. There was no sign of his squadron. He then dashed to Ikeja cantonment. He saw none of his ferret or Saladin and was making inquiries. All of a sudden, he was recognized by one of the sentries as the officer commanding the unit, rumored to be coming from Abeokuta to attack. Iboba, who came to the gate to authorize Ejo's exit, ordered guns trained on Obienu. Obienu protested his innocence. "Liar!" Iboba screamed at him. "How was it possible that your unit was bringing their firepower to come and fight in a pre-planned mutiny, and you, their commanding officer, did not know? Non-commissioned officers do not mobilize for actions if they were not instructed by their officer in charge. Who authorized them?" Obienu swore that he did not know anything. He said that he went to Memilari's party, slept in a friend's place in Shomolu, and was here trying to go back to Abeokuta. Ejo then intervened. He suggested that Obienu went ahead on Abeokuta Road to neutralize his renegade unit. Obienu replied, "Without troops to back me up, it would be unwise to go there to stop them." That sounded reasonable to Ejo and indeed confirmed that Obienu actually wasn't part of the mutiny. Had he been part of the rebels, he wouldn't have hesitated to go out there to meet his unit, Ejos said. Henceforth, Obienu switched loyalty and joined the loyal forces trying to neutralize the revolution that he had been a part of. Having reviewed all these materials, we can then come to the conclusion that Obienu crushed the coup by doing one of these two things, or even the two of them at the same time. Number one, perhaps Obienu was initially in sync with his peers about changing the government of the country through the military, but maybe chickened out towards the D-Day as he didn't turn up for briefing and execution of task. Perhaps Obienu had tipped off Ironsi as strongly accused by Ben Bullier, one of the plotters of the coup, in his book, The Five Majors. If indeed Obienu tipped off Ironsi, and Ironsi couldn't be gotten hold of by the coup plotters when they came to arrest him in his house and at the federal guards, and it was indeed Ironsi's non-arrest which foiled the coup, then Obienu crushed the coup in that instance. Two, when Obienu had woken up and got back from his mistress's place, and he found out that the revolution had taken place but was not successful totally, he joined the ranks of Ironsi's men and then was able to stop his second reconnaissance squadron, which was supposed to be used to wage war against the reactionaries, as the revolutionaries called the other part of the army. So if Obienu was able to stand down his troops from coming down to Ikeja to finish up the revolution, in that way he crushed the coup. Either of these two ways, we can then see how Major Obienu, who initially was slated as part of the revolutionaries, is now being touted as one who indeed crushed the revolution. Ironically, in some months later, when the counter-coup by the northern soldiers were staged, Obienu was one of the first casualties who lost his life in Abeokuta when the northern revenge coup started. The irony of fate.